Hello, everyone. Welcome, and thank you for joining us for today's presentation, brought to you by ISSA, the Worldwide Cleaning Industry Association, and made possible by SoftBank Robotics. I'm Hannah Oates, your host for today's presentation, and I'm very excited to have you join us for part 3 of a 5-part webinar series, Automation Amidst the New Normal. During these uncertain times, ISSA, along with SoftBank Robotics, developed this webinar series to assist the industry in navigating the challenges brought on by the coronavirus outbreak and deliver solutions to meet the needs of this new normal. Our goal with this series is to continue to raise the image of the cleaning industry and effectively continue to change the way the world views cleaning while elevating the awareness of cleaning for health. So thank you again for joining us today. Part 3 of the webinar series, Automation Amidst the New Normal, will include today's discussion on 5 ways humans and robots can collaborate during times of crisis. So if you missed parts 1 and 2 of the series, they can be viewed on demand at issa.com/TV. Part 4 of the webinar series will take place 2 weeks from today, on May 28th. So please mark your calendars and be sure to join us for another great presentation. Before I introduce our esteemed panelists and get our presentation started, I have a couple of announcements. First, we want you to get the most out of today's webinar and have any specific questions you may have answered by our subject matter experts. So please ask any questions you have for your panelists using the questions tab on the right-hand toolbar and type your questions at any time during the presentation. We will have Q&A sessions following the discussion. Secondly, all registrants will receive a recording of today's webinar by email to view on demand within the next couple of days. And with that, let's get things started. Today's presentation will be moderated by Matt Willis. Matt Willis is Head of Product at SoftBank Robotics. Dr. Matt Willis is the Head of Product Design at SoftBank Robotics America, where he guides a team of designers, engineers, and strategists in creating meaningful experiences for SoftBank's robots and automation products. He has a PhD in human-computer interaction and has over a decade of experience building digital products that are focused on bringing value to the world. We have Holly Borrego, Vice President of the West Region for the Service Companies. Holly has more than 30 years of experience in the building service industry. She has held every position from frontline janitor to managing director. She has an extensive background in sales, P&L management, contract optimization, time engineering, lean systems, root cause analysis, and creating processes and programs for janitorial operations. Holly is one of the 6 founding members of the ISSA Hygeia Women's Network, the first and only women's network in the cleaning industry. And we have Chris Wetmore, Vice President of Sales at ISSA Robotics. Chris Wetmore has over 25 years experience in the commercial building service contractor and JanSan industry. Chris's goal at ISSA Robotics is to use his skills to improve human wellness through autonomous solutions. Prior to his role at ISSA Robotics, Chris spent 20 years at a senior leadership role at Tennant Company, lastly leading North American strategic accounts. So needless to say, everyone, we have an incredible group of industry experts, and I am more than happy to get out of the way and hand things over to Matt Willis. Matt, it's all yours.
Thanks, Hannah, and thanks for that awesome introduction. I also want to thank ISSA for helping make this webinar happen, and also thank you to Holly and Chris for joining us. How are you both?
Doing awesome. Well, Matt. Yes, thank you.
Great.
I'm doing great, thanks.
I'm really excited to be here today with two of the industry experts, both you, Holly, and Chris, really around this topic that's really important right now, and that's how humans and robots can work together really effectively. There's really never been a better time for this conversation as now, especially in the cleaning industry, with the pandemic going on, the increase in demands that we're seeing on cleaning services. This conversation about humans and robots and automation services working together to really bring value here is quite exciting. So I'm really looking forward to this topic. So how this is going to work today is we're going to cover this in sort of 5 parts. We want we want to be able to have a discussion around each of these topics with the panelists and also with you in the audience. So the first one we're going to touch on is around efficiency. So how can automation help efficiency in the cleaning industry? We want to touch on social distancing. This is a new thing for all of us, and I'm sure it's very strange to be walking around the streets right now with all these sort of rules in place. We want to talk about how that impacts our ability to perform these services in the industry. We want to talk about how we execute a high standard of clean, which is even more important to give people the confidence to sort of come back into the workplace and really, as we start to transition from the shelter-in-place kind of position. I want to talk a little bit about data as well, and how automation services and software services can now bring this additional value and this additional confidence as we work through these challenges. And then lastly, we're going to talk a bit about how we, now that we have these efficiencies in place and these robots are working alongside humans to bring that value, what do we do with that time? How do we change the way that we do cleaning in this industry? We really want you to participate and help us out in this conversation. So as we're going through these 5 topics, please feel free to jump in the chat, ask us questions, give us feedback, and really help us sort of drive that conversation. As we go through, as Hannah said, we'll be putting some polls up as well, and we would love to hear your thoughts and feedback in responses to those polls, so that we can really get into the core topics that everybody's really keen to hear about, and leveraging the expertise that we have on the panel today. So without further ado, let's jump into the first topic today, which is all about increasing cleaning efficiency for us. So if we take automation and its purpose, automation at its core is about efficiency. It's there to empower humanity to do more and give us this sort of superpower of multitasking. It allows us to parallel tasks. So while I'm doing one thing, automation can be doing something else for me. So it's like this sort of extension of ourselves. From that, those of you that have tuned into sort of some of the previous webinars, you would have learned a little bit about how automation can help us sort of scale that amount of time saved, how it enables additional things to happen like sanitization, and some of those demands we're seeing on the cleaning industry that we didn't have before. The cleaning industry's gone from this thing that happens at 3 a.m. In the building that no one ever sort of thinks about, to being really the forefront of what people are asking about when they're sort of stepping into buildings and going about their day. And we're well aware of that, and I think that automation is one of those things that's going to help sort of drive some of that efficiency. So I actually want to start by asking the audience about this. So let's bring up the first poll. So I want to ask you, the audience, which cleaning tasks do you need more efficiency in these sort of day-to-day operations? And while we're waiting for those answers to come through, I actually want to pass over to you, Holly. I'd love to hear your take on this. Where have you seen that the industry has needed more efficiency, and where are these needs even greater in this new normal that we're facing at the moment?
I think that's a great question, Matt. And on the hospitality side, which I think translates perfectly to the commercial side, there's going to be a demand for increased surface disinfection. Certainly, I think the high touch point areas in any facility are going to require a lot more attention. And especially when you're operating in facilities that are 24/7, like a casino, hotel lobby, airport, or any facility of that type, it's constant cleaning. And when you can deploy something to take part of the work from the person that is performing the disinfection cleaning, then you automatically gain time for them to be able to increase the frequencies. And I just think it's going to be a huge requirement moving forward in this new world.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I think, the funny thing with automation is sometimes people are looking at some of these answers and they might be saying, oh, it'd be great to automate surface disinfection or great to automate window cleaning. And I think one of the, as you're saying, Holly, one of the benefits here is that you don't always have to automate the thing that everyone's sort of asking for. What you can do is automate some of those other tasks to actually give you back time so that you can go and spend it on some of these sorts of areas like surface disinfection. So I can see the poll results coming through at the moment. So it looks like the audience totally agrees with you, Holly. I think the efficiency that people are sort of looking for is around the sort of surface disinfection, which is, unsurprising for all the reasons that you've sort of brought up. These high touch areas, these door handles, these services that people are using every day, we're hearing is harboring some of these viruses that that people are sort of concerned about. So Chris, I want to lean on you for a second. So in your experience in talking to your sort of customers and your clients out there, what have you been hearing in terms of efficiencies and what people are asking for?
Yeah, it's definitely been a very interesting 90 days, to say the least, right? You had this pre-COVID period where we found our clients kind of balancing speed, productivity, client satisfaction, and ultimately economic profit. That's kind of we pressed the pause button on that a little bit. I think now you're finding more. It's around confidence. Confidence rules, as I love to say with a lot of our customer base. And I'm really not surprised by the disinfection answer there, because I think our customers we want to instill confidence in our employees and their site's employees and in the client themselves that health and safety is priority one. So we're finding a lot of time spent talking about disinfection. And it was interesting. One of my last calls I made in person in March, early March, I saw this play out right behind me. There were 3 of us walked into a building that we were new to the building, new to the client, and we had a cleaner following us around, wiping down surfaces, everything we touched, from high touch to monitors, even chairs after we walked out of the building. So I kind of said, from early March on, I said, yeah, it's going to be a new norm. And I think the other big piece for us is that we're also seeing our clients prepare for multiple labor scenarios. And I think everybody would admit on the call here, we don't have a crystal ball, but this thing is changing so rapidly that they have to prepare for multiple scenarios. And that's where I think automation can absolutely help in this, and they can be prepared with their return to work plans. We're seeing that a lot and having those discussions a lot, Matt.
I find it really interesting. You mentioned that as you're going through that somebody was coming behind and cleaning, and it makes me think. It brings me back to that sort of confidence question again. It is that if you're making cleaning visible and people can see that it's being done, I think that's going to be really important. That it gives them confidence. Oh, okay, yes, my building was cleaned, or yes, people are sort of taking this seriously, and therefore I can sort of refocus back on why I'm here, which is to get my work done and work with other people in that respect. So what I want to do is to segue through into our next topic, which is around social distancing. So I remember when this whole shelter-in-place thing started, I went out and I went to go to my local bakery to buy some bread. And to be honest, it was the strangest feeling ever. I was standing in a line. I had distance between people. There was only 2 people allowed in the store, and it was a real sort of change, and it sort of made you feel a little uneasy. And I think over time, people are getting sort of more and more used to this. And technology is playing this role now. You're hearing about people doing temperature checks as they walk into buildings. People are doing contactless deliveries for their courier, for the courier side of things. You're hearing more about automation and robots and UV sanitization and some of those things. I remember reading an article the other day that Spot Mini, the 4-legged robot by Boston Dynamics, has been deployed in a park in Singapore to go around and remind people of this sort of social distancing that's sort of going on. So, with all of these things going on, these technologies that are around, I sort of want to bring it back to the people and bring it back to sort of the human side of it. And again, I want to go back to the audience. So what I'm interested in here is, what is some of your top concerns for the safety of your staff as they're going out and they're spending time at client sites and some of those kinds of things. We'd really love to get that sort of feedback. And again, while the audience is going through that and providing us all of these responses, Chris, I actually want to come back to you again. What have you been hearing from sort of some of your customers and clients, and requests around this?
Yeah, great question, Matt. And I'd even add to the answers you have there that we're also seeing it's an excellent time to train your staff through this as well. Health and safety, in a workforce maybe that's turning more than the norm, training becomes incredibly important. And so we're finding that's a key concern of a lot of our staff, especially when you're working with disinfectants that maybe some of the cleaning staff isn't used to. But But candidly, I've been incredibly pleased with both our company's response and our clients' response to this in terms of health and safety around our collective workforces. We have PPE guidelines in place that we follow when we're out engaging with customers live, and as well as our customers have the same pieces that they're putting into place. So, by default, I think automation helps in distancing. I don't think there's any doubt in that. But the nice thing it offers is flexibility, because now you can bring cleaning to first shift mentality and offer flexibility, whether you wanted to clean before people occupy the building, or perhaps later in the day, or perhaps throughout the day as, and again, as occupancy rates, we figure these things out, you'll start to see what that looks like. I think the other big piece too with respect to distancing is, we're, at ISSA Robotics and SoftBank, we're incredibly driven towards virtual deployments, and whether it be video or written material or our client services group, we try and make this as easy as possible for customers to engage automation, and so that they're knowledgeable and if they need to, can fall on our in-market resources for additional training. So we're finding that to be incredibly, incredibly useful. So yeah.
Yeah, I was watching this poll come through, and it was really interesting, the sort of split between these sort of three middle concerns. So, the extent of space to cover potential transfer, of the virus, the amount of human interaction we're having at client sites, of course, availability of PPE, that's been a big topic as well. Holly, with your expertise around, the physical execution of cleaning, keeping these sort of three things in mind, how do you see that sort of going to change in terms of the scope of work, the documentation, minimizing contact, some of these things that the audience is responding to at the moment?
Well, I think an important thing to keep in mind is, one is the availability of PPE, but the other is when you think about someone vacuuming for an extended period of time, wearing an N95 or any type of mask, it is so difficult to do, and we're already having issues with that now. And so if you can deploy a robotic vacuum into a space, you're not only saving that worker a lot of exhausting work, but it cuts down on your need for some of that PPE. And again, especially in these environments where they're, I think we're going to see a lot of increased cleaning, and we're always asked to do more with less. And how are we going to accomplish that when clients want more of the high touch point cleaning? Usually, you have to give up something in the balance. But if you deploy a robotic vacuum, you're really ticking a lot of boxes. You're getting the floor clean, you're freeing up the worker's time, and when it comes to the amount of human interaction at the client site, you're limiting that, as well as again, helping with the PPE situation. So I think it's very important.
Oh, that mask, that N95 comment you made, I hadn't even really thought about that as you were talking about that. That is incredibly important. As it goes to be, the thought of me jumping on an airplane and flying from New York to Los Angeles with a mask on, it would be difficult. I can't imagine operating a vacuum during that entire time as well. So that's a great point.
It's tough.
Yeah.
Absolutely. It's quite a laborious task, sort of having to sort of cover a large area with a machine on your back, and sort of, the sort of repetitive thing, and a dusty task at that. You're kicking up dust. It's irritating your airways, causing you to sneeze, cough, some of these sorts of things. And so, yeah, 100% agree. I mean, a robot doesn't mind having a HEPA filter attached to its air exhaust. It's not going to complain about that.
Exactly.
Awesome. So, thank you as well to the audience for your participation. This is really great, and thank you so much for responding into our polls, because it really helps us sort of drive the conversation as well. So as we sort of go through this conversation, we're talking about this execution of this sort of high standard of clean, and this is putting a lot of sort of, I guess, pressure on some of our staff. Not only are they wanting more frequent cleans, but they're wanting things done to a higher standard, and sort of, in a lot of respects, a lot of proof that it's occurred. And so this is putting a lot of pressure on the industry, of course, because people are generally asking for these things, and not necessarily having that sort of cost conversation. In terms of that standard of clean as well, we've got these certifications around HEPA, GBAC. I mean, we just talked about using N95 masks and some of these things. So a lot of these sort of policies are coming into place, and standards are being talked about, and some of that kind of thing. Holly, I wanted to go to you for a second, and I'll have you think about this as we sort of bring up the poll in a moment. But I'm really, really interested in what the probability of sort of some of these sort of standards coming in will be. Before we do that though, let's dive into the poll. So audience, what is your biggest pain point on executing a higher standard of clean for your clients and customers? We would love to hear about that. So Holly, probability of the industry actually being able to buy into some of these changes, actually being able to execute on them, and how do we address this sort of tension that I was bringing up between the cost and the cost increase and the increase in services?
Well, I think, for me, I've always tried to focus on holistically taking care of the staff. I think for me, that's number one. And I think everything kind of follows behind that. And when you start looking at holistically taking care of the staff instead of asking, what does a machine cost, you start to find out that when you invest in your staff and invest in the tools that they need, that the cost savings follow. And it helps you do some of the other things that are on this list, like meeting the requested scope of work. So I think, from my standpoint, if I'm lessening the physical stress on that worker and watching, what they're inhaling and chemicals they're using and machines, then it does reduce the staff churn. It does help with the scheduling, because now I can deploy a robotic vacuum more than one time in a shift if I need to. And that's helping me not only meet the requested scope of work, but meet the increased scope of work. So I still get to charge for it, but it is helping me meet without just pushing the workers harder and harder. I just don't think that's a realistic way to manage a contract.
How are you seeing at the moment that some of this work is being met? Obviously with this high. So actually, as we look at the poll results, I mean, this requested scope of work, the audience is saying, this is a real pain point. So how are you seeing some of this being handled at the moment in the industry?
Well, for us, we are focused on deploying robots. I don't think that you can increase the scope. I mean, we're working with our clients right now on the new requirement for cleaning and what their expectations are and how we move through the space, and then working with them on what does that new cost look like and how are we going to help contain those costs. And the way to contain those costs is not by adding more labor, but it's by investing in the equipment that's going to help us to redeploy the labor into those high touch point areas, or areas of disinfection that are, in a kitchen or a restaurant, or, in an office environment, and then pushing off the floor cleaning, the vacuuming and the floor scrubbing to the robotics.
Giving our cleaning staff superpowers, allowing them to sort of augment,
exactly,
do things at once. Yeah, I love that. Thank you so much for that answer. Chris, this has obviously been quite a foundational shift in cleaning. Given your your deep expertise, both yours and ISSA in this space, what can we learn from perhaps previous shifts that might have occurred in the past as well that might help us in this moment?
Yeah, I don't think, admittedly, we have much to compare this to. You go back to 2009, you go back to H1N1, that time frame, and what happened during that, and that's probably the largest health and safety risk, if you really think about it, to the cleaning space in the last 20 years. And I think, yes, it changed chemistry, it changed process for sure, but I think for me, everything else kind of falls short of what we're in admittedly today. And I just, it's interesting because when you look at the past, the way we clean floors today is not materially different than the way we cleaned floors 25 years ago. So for me, automation is not just a step level improvement, it's probably a quadruple step improvement, because it just impacts so much else that we do at a customer site. So, I think I don't see this change stopping. I think there's staying power with automation for obvious reasons, and that exists obviously outside of cleaning, because at the end of the day, I think what the labor looks like in the future still is shaping itself. In some instances, labor will look very much like it is today in terms of the staffing and the duties. But in other markets around the country, it may look totally different. I think it's going to depend on union activity, non-union, region of the country, type of client. I think there's just so much we're still figuring out that automation, I think, will be adopted, absorbed, and implemented in our customers and facilities. So.
Yeah, and I can imagine as this is done, people are going to learn more about the value of that automation and how it can actually augment that their staff and give them those superpowers, give them the ability to I can actually offload that clean, and I can therefore focus on these other areas. The overall service is going to raise in this space as well, which I think is sort of super interesting. Yeah, thank you both for that. Thank you both for that response. So moving from there, I mean, we've sort of talked about the demands that are being placed on the cleaning industry, some of the requests that are sort of coming through from clients, and then so where I want to sort of shift from there is talking about how we can use data to sort of provide this sort of proof of clean. I believe that as people start to return to work, we've been under the shelter-in-place order. We're under social distancing rules. It doesn't seem like they're going to end anytime soon. People are going to be nervous. They're going to come out of their homes. They're going to start to come back into the workplace, and they're going to be asking questions about, was my building cleaned, and how many people have been here, and has somebody gone through and sanitized this kind of surface? Even prior to the pandemic, I've heard from people in the industry that they might hire people to go out to sites and check that things have been done as they said they were, and perhaps they will provide a report or something like this to their customers to sort of say, we've come and we've inspected, and we are meeting whatever the standard that it will be. I think what we're hearing is that need for that's going to increase. And so one way to sort of look at that is how do we provide data from these autonomous services, because we're no longer just having to rely on labor to go out and do these inspections, but perhaps these autonomous machines are coming through and sort of talking about yes, it was cleaned on these days at this time, all the way down to exactly which routes, which areas of the carpets were cleaned, which rooms, some of these things. So I'm going to come to you just in a second, Chris, as well, to sort of talk a little bit more about this. But I do want to go to the audience, and I want to sort of, what I'm really looking to learn is where has data already proven to be impactful in your business, in your cleaning operations, even before the pandemic? Actually, Holly, I think you spoke about this a little bit at ISSA 2019. You led a discussion around how data can help clinch in the client relationship, and I'll come to you as well, Chris, on this sort of similar topic. But Holly, I'd love to hear more about that conversation and where you've seen data really helping in this whole relationship.
Sure. So I think in the RFP process, it's critical anymore. And your point about cleaning validation earlier, I think that's going to become more and more important. And I think in the RFP process, as everyone I'm sure knows, the majority of our costs are labor. But when you can invest in a piece of equipment that can not replace the labor, but can help you add value to the contract and validate that the cleaning was done, it helps in so many different ways. It'll help not only gain new business, but also, as you said before, when you're provided with the maps of exactly where that machine cleaned the day before, it helps management not only manage their people, but also report back to the client that this was done, this was taken care of. I'm sure there's a lot of people that understand that you ran an auto scrubber and the next day you had a complaint. The client says, well, you didn't really clean the floor. But you put a robotic report in front of them and they understand that the floor was cleaned. So there's a lot of savings in that because you're not doing these repeat processes to satisfy the client. The client then starts to look for what happened, why is the floor dirty, between 10 p.m. and 8 a.m. And it's actually a bit of a problem solver, to be honest. So that it can help.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point actually, is that you mentioned sort of that the investigation is to, I dispute that the clean was done, and then the other person saying, well it was, and I know that the team were in it. Sort of this, I guess, helps empower through a data-driven conversation. And I liked what you said about the route maps and things like that, and how they empower as well. I mean, you can start to get that other level, so that if someone's sort of looking at a room and saying, hey, I'm really questioning if this floor area was cleaned, you can actually have the proof that, hey, it was either done at this point, or perhaps there was a reason why that was missed for some reason. I know from automation perspective, you can have the best autonomous robot in the world, but really what we're looking at here is a process change and an adoption change. And I think we'll get into that a little bit more soon as well. So Chris, coming to you on this as well. So you're working with a subscription model around the distribution of Wiz. Can you talk a little bit more about the importance of some of this data in demonstrating ROI and the health benefit of that investment for buildings and people utilizing the technology?
Right. Yeah, absolutely, Matt. This is hands down one of my favorite topics as we talk about cleaning, basically, especially around equipment. Because 10 years ago, we didn't really talk about data. It was talked about by a select few, I'll say that, but from a manufacturer base, we were still struggling to understand how will customers use this data. And I love some of your answers there. I'm sure it'll dovetail nicely with what I'm going to say, because I think, with Wiz, we try to make the discussion very simple. We want the product to be ROI positive in month one. So from the second we ship that unit out and the second you unbox it and you begin to operate it, we're tracking usage for you. We're tracking square footage. We're tracking assists that pop up or needs for assists. We're tracking error codes. And we want people to be fully educated on what to do with that information, how to map routes so that you can be even more efficient in your cleaning. That your first move is not to take the unit and go right into a corner, right? It's to stay out in the open space so you can really get the speed and the production rates where you need them to be. And Matt, I just also comment that I know the tides are turning when I go on sales visits now and I'm sitting in front of IT professionals and data analysts. That's when the tide's turning. So I think it's super fascinating to me because I think it all comes down to performing full scope, and the benefit of performing full scope is a health and safe environment. So it's such a great topic, and I love what we're doing with Wiz Connect and with Wiz and products like iSynergy, because it absolutely helps tell that story. So.
Absolutely. I think you touched on a couple of important points there. I think from a services model perspective, what we're looking at is not just, hey, purchase the vacuum cleaner, it's going to vacuum the space, it's sort of go and forget. I mean, what we're sort of offering is a solution to market. And I'm not just talking about Wiz and Wiz Connect and some of these offerings, but I think generally in the automation industry, it's not just about making the best robot that can do this one task. It's also about understanding where it's going to be deployed, where that data can be used. I think from a data perspective, if we touch on that, you were talking about data analysts being in the room and some of these people being involved in this. The stack of where that data could be used hits the operator knowing about whether they're using the machine and whether they've completed the job for the day, right the way through to the building manager who's got the proof of clean and confidence that these areas are done to a level that we sort of want to talk about, but also down to deployments. As we all know, with something like automation or any tool for that matter, it's about the effective use of it that's going to sort of drive some of those ROI targets. And so if we can use this data to say, hey, if you actually operate this route slightly differently, we think you might actually get a better increase in that effectiveness. Are you seeing the same thing, Chris?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's been good for the clients. It's also been good for us in our training and our ability to put together virtual deployment materials that resonate with our customers. So we're serving a lot. The data is really And since on a subscription model, Matt, we're responsible for all the service. We're responsible for the parts. We're responsible for any upkeep. That data is vital for efficiency. We want to identify a problem, know it's a problem, and call you to tell you there's a problem before it's a problem. So I think that's the fun part that data can solve for us. So yeah.
Awesome. Completely agree. Which is actually a really nice segue, because we've sort of gone from human robot collaboration, and we've talked about the automation technology, and we've talked about the demands on staff, and I kind of want to bring that together a little bit. So working with automation technologies, some of this data, understanding the demands, we want to sort of bring all that together and say, how is this augmenting the workforce? Now that we know that deploying automation inside your cleaning process can give you back 30% cleaning efficiency, the question starts to come up, well, what are we going to do with that time? And obviously right now we've got these demands on sanitization and some of those things, and I think really to answer that question, we really need to dive into the sort of human element of it. At the end of the day, the effect of automation is a human problem as much as a technology problem, and so for that, we've obviously got a lot of tools that we can use in terms of human-centered design techniques. We can go out, we can understand the series of tasks that people are doing. We can look at the business process, and we can really improve over time how that collaboration is occurring between sort of robots and those people sort of interacting with them. So before we go to you, Holly, about this, because I'm really keen to hear your take on this, I do want to go to the audience. So audience members, where do you need to reinvest that time to manage these post-pandemic demands? So we'd love to hear from you. Is it around client relations, sourcing supplies, some of those kinds of things? So Holly, you're an industry leader and expert on this and the reinvestment around workloading. I would love to get your sort of some of your takeaways around this as well, on where you see this sort of going.
Well, I think the two things that stand out the most to me are disinfecting and meeting labor needs, which to me go hand in hand. As the need for additional disinfecting regimens happen in everywhere from the day porters to anyone working in a casino, airport, restroom area. The demands are going to be very high, but it's not going to stop there. It's going to transfer to the night too. And as what we're seeing on the hospitality side is, although there was already a very high focus on disinfection in the hotel room, there's an even higher demand at night. So we're looking at increasing the disinfection in casinos and common areas, meeting spaces, etc. Not only more frequently, but using any kind of automation or additional tools. So we need to redeploy that labor again to disinfecting at night where they would be vacuuming. Now we have them doing additional duties, and it goes back to cost containment. Our clients are very much looking to us to be able to optimize those additional needs and help control their costs, because coming out of this, nobody has just a lot more money that they can dedicate to their cleaning program. So those are the two areas I think are going to be highest, is meeting the labor needs and because of the disinfecting.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, so there we are. The audience completely agrees. We're investing time around disinfecting and meeting some of those labor needs. Absolutely. Chris, I want to sort of start to wrap up our conversation. I'm looking at the time as well. I want to end our conversation on some of the actions for our audience. So speaking from your experience and working in this space, what are some of the actions do you think that our customers can take to improve on this area?
Yeah, as it relates to automation, we try to make it simple. We're utilizing teach and repeat technology so that clients can really move at their own pace to map their properties and their facilities. But when it comes to operation, the unit will operate at one safe speed to accentuate health and safety. So, for us, we try to maximize, back to the labor poll there, we try to maximize square footage coverage. And if you just take Whiz, for example, you can do up to 3 hours on a single charge with the ability to swap batteries, and then be able to do a 80% charge on a third battery charge with 2 hours. So essentially you can vacuum for an entire shift if you'd like. And we're not finding customers vacuuming that much right now, but the trends are obviously increasing, given the fact that there's more of a focus on the carpet. Outside of disinfection, there's more of a focus on the carpet with respect to bacteria levels and filtration. So it's good to get that back if it's there, if it's needed. You can get 40,000 square feet of coverage out of a Whiz on an 8-hour shift with 2 batteries. So I think scrubbing is a little more complex because battery swapping technology is not really advanced enough to lend itself to just scrubbing constantly. Your answer is adding more machines, which sometimes doesn't fit into the economic puzzle, as it relates to the role or to the job. So, I think, my advice is when you get into the scrubbing components of it, just give us a call, and we're more than willing to come out. You can jump on our website and at icesrobo.com, and we'll be more than happy to help you out with Emma or Whiz for that matter. So it's so it's been an interesting transition, because the other thing I'd add, Matt, I know we're out of time, is that really it's things are changing so rapidly. So things that worked for us maybe 2 months ago in the floor cleaning space, we're evolving rapidly with it. So we'll keep on top of those trends for the industry and be able to help you out with that. So
it's interesting you mentioned carpet cleaning. I know right now it's been quite topical in the news as to what impact is our flooring having, and is that something that sort of needs to be cleaned. And so I suspect that demand for carpet cleaning is only on the rise, and especially if you combine that with the need to be visible in your clean. And as you were saying right at the start of the conversation, I remember walking into a meeting and having someone cleaning in behind us. If you can have some of these autonomous cleaners just running throughout the day, so people are going, oh, it's visible, it's maintaining the level of clean, it's increasing. I think these things are super interesting. I'm really enjoying talking to you both, and I think this is such a great conversation. But I do want to come across to our audience in the time that we sort of have left. I've been watching some of the questions come through, so thank you so much to those that have been posting those in. We'll try and get to a couple of these. I would encourage you to follow up with any of us or ISSA if you've got any of these questions after the webinar. One that came in that I'm really interested to ask you both, and perhaps I'll start with you, Holly, for this question, was that somebody asks, do you feel that there needs to be an increase in the cleaning and disinfection of housekeeping or custodial equipment between use? I know with some of these autonomous technologies, we've got batteries that are being swapped, we've got the bags that are happening, we've got the equipment itself. Where do you see that sort of changing in sort of the workplace and sort of some of the tasks and processes that are happening? And then I'll come to you for the same question, Chris. I'll start with you, Holly.
Yeah, so no, I absolutely believe that there needs to be disinfection in between uses of the equipment. I think that is something we actually wrote into our reopening plan, and we have put that process in place for ensuring that when someone is finished with a piece of equipment, they bring it down and it's disinfected. I think, when you look at the way the world's changed today, and you look at every little task that has to be changed. I know we're focusing on disinfection and some of the increased cleaning, but just the way we're going to move through space, the way we have to stagger shifts, the way we have to move around in a space, there's going to be a lot of lost time. And I think, we would be remiss to not to mention that. And I think it's critical that when you start to look at your labor, I understand how much it's increased on the hospitality side. It's been dramatic. And I think Marriott said they thought that their labor would increase 40%, and just on the cleaning. And so I think when you talk about that and you talk about everything that's going to happen on the cleaning side, I think if people don't start looking for alternative ways to reduce some of that labor costs, they're going to be left behind. I truly believe that. And I think that you have to understand where the robotics fit into your program and understand the best use for them. And I think that's where the early adopters are really going to have a leg up on the ones that are coming later to the game, because we've learned a lot in the amount of time that we've had. That's why, I love being an early adopter of innovation, because it's going to get me out ahead and get the learning and the data and everything that I need to help me not only manage that additional time that's needed, but it's going to help me in the RFP process and every other aspect of the cleaning program.
Thank you. That's 100%. Chris, do you have something to add on that?
There we go. Let's unmute here. No, I think Holly said that very eloquently there. I think we definitely want to follow those procedures as it relates to equipment. I couldn't agree more. So, yeah. Cool.
Another question coming through, which is somewhat related to this, and actually I'm going to start with you, Chris, on this one. Do you know of any, or can you share some real life examples of some of the cost savings that FMs are seeing by augmenting their janitorial services in this way through automation? Do you have any examples you can sort of share with the audience and sort of to have them really understand where these cost benefits could be?
Yeah, and here's the nice thing about automation. We many times, you look at equipment as compared to other equipment, and when you deal with automation, you're opening the other triggers up that are so important. As Holly was mentioning earlier, so much of the money is tied into labor. So when you talk about real world examples, we have calculators that can dictate, wage rate, benefit rate, pension if applicable in some union environments, coverage, hourly vacuum rates, facility sizes, frequency of vacuuming rates. We tie everything into the calculation of automation, and it just opens so much more up. And like I was saying earlier, I think we really build this as ROI positive in month one. If the pricing on this at $499 a month and $549 with 2 batteries, it's really easy to understand return on investment, and it's easy to calculate. And back to the engaging of our client services group and how important it is that the customers are realizing that out of it, Matt. So. So I think there's no 8 or 9 month payback, especially with Wiz. It's hey, let's plan on this, being positive month one.
Awesome. Thank you both. I just want to wrap up with one final thing before we hand over to Hannah. And that is, if either of you have anything that you'd like to share. So one of the questions that came through is, and I know this is a broad one, but how exactly is automation going to help us prepare to reopen some of our facilities? So I might start as the two of you are thinking about that, if there's anything you sort of want to share as sort of parting wisdom. But for me, that question, and thank you for that question to the audience, really a lot of this really covers all of the aspects that we've talked about today in terms of the augmentation of process, the data and reporting that we know we can provide so that people are confident that the cleans occurred, and some of these kinds of things. But I do want to pass to you, Holly, Chris, if you've got any sort of final thoughts that you'd like to share with the audience around how automation is going to help us to prepare for this new normal and what we're sort of heading into once shelter-in-place orders are being lifted around the country.
Go ahead, Holly.
Okay. So yeah, I think it goes back to when we have a machine that can take care of the floor cleaning, whether it's vacuuming or scrubbing, then we can take that person that was performing those duties and we can put them on the electrostatic backpack sprayers. We can put them on the high touch point cleaning. We can put them on the disinfection of the equipment that the cleaning staff is going to use. We can put them on there's a lot of sign changes that are going to happen. There's so many things that have to happen before we reopen that we don't do day to day. And when you can take the entire floor space off of that staff's plate, then I think that's huge. I really do. I think that's just a huge increase in your ability to reopen.
Yeah, and I just add that it just, for us, it's the uncertainty. And like I was mentioning earlier around, I think a lot of our customers are preparing for multiple labor scenarios. Automation can help in many of them, if not all of them. So I think the uncertainty piece of it is a definite tie and a need to drive in addition to what Holly's speaking to. Yeah.
I would like to add too that in some markets, one of the things that we're seeing is people don't want to come back to work. They don't feel safe. So I think in a lot of markets, this gives you that elasticity in your staffing. And so it allows you, if you had needed 4 people before, now you need 3 in a robot. So, I mean, that's a significant help as well.
Right.
I think they're all very good points, and I think what I'd like to close on is, automation again is not just a technology problem, but it's really considering the human element of this. And sort of, I'm really excited by the conversation today. We've covered so many aspects, everything from how the technology can help with efficiency through to how we need to be partnering to not just deploy robots in these spaces, but understand how people are using them and working together. And I think this isn't just human robot collaboration. This is a collaboration between the technology industry, experts like yourselves, and our customers and clients that are using this technology to their best effect. Hannah, I could keep talking to these two all day, and I've really enjoyed the conversation, but I am going to pass it back to you for the final wrap up and final thoughts. But thank you to the audience as well for your participation. Really enjoyed that interaction, and I hope we can do this again soon. Over to you, Hannah.
Thank you, and thank you to our audience for the questions and really great participation. And thank you, of course, to our presenters and panelists for their experience, knowledge, and excellent discussion. I would also like to thank SoftBank Robotics for their sponsorship of this webinar series. So for our audience, if you are interested in more information or access to additional resources available from ISSA or SoftBank Robotics and from our panelists, please check out the following websites, including issa.com/coronavirus, softbankrobotics.com. Additionally, you can visit ICE Robotics. Their link is also on the screen, as well as the service companies. So please go check out those websites for more information. And before we sign off today, please join us for our next webinar in this series on a new shift, a new coworker, automation to augment the workforce on Thursday, May 28th, and that's 2 weeks from today. You will all receive a link and updates as the next session approaches. So thank you again so much for joining us today and for your great participation and questions. And we look forward to having you join us in 2 weeks. Until next time.